everyone, and welcome back to another episode of CQP Moments. As always, I am your host, the Coupon Queen Pin. I'm back with Christina and Javier Llerena, and they're still sharing about their amazing book and all of the awesome things that you can use to help in your daily life. So, let's take a moment out, and I'll be back with Christina and Javier.
Marriage and all the data says, obviously, right, like if you prepare, if you actually go on a retreat, or if you do anything like a basic assessment, we do this like prepare and rich assessment, which is really awesome and just gives you like, okay, what are our strengths, what are our challenges, like gives you kind of the narrative of your relationship, right, the themes. And my whole thing is that I don't think those themes change. Like I think that once the relationship is born, like we call them potholes sometimes, like we have certain issues that we argue about, right? Like if it's money, if it's the in-laws, if it's the holiday, whatever it is, right? There's certain things that are always a more challenging area. Like for us, our strengths have a lot to do with our faith, how we raise our kids, like our parenting philosophies. Those are some of our strengths. But we always are going to have these other challenge areas. And so the reason why we want to do the book about healing things before it begins is that you're really setting up your trajectory as a couple to work and heal together even before you actually go through any sort of ceremony, whether it be civil or religious, right? And it's so important to kind of have a clue what you're getting into. And I don't just mean like legally and financially. I mean like, what are we walking into eyes wide open about? What are we giving to each other? And Javi made a beautiful point earlier about how he feels, that his mission or his role as a husband is to lift his spouse up. And he does that. And that is something that is an innate strength of him. And so how do we leverage that in our marriage, right? How do we leverage the good points to overcome? And that's what we felt compelled, because what happens is, as people don't talk about, how do you deal with a credit card balance, or how do you celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, or do you believe in God? Sometimes they don't, or would you adopt? Right. Do you believe in possibly adopting foster child? Like, what's your take on that? And then all of a sudden you're in this relationship or marriage 5, 7, 10 years down the line, and you're like, what? That's not good, right? We don't want
right. I think that's what it is. It's a lot of couples. We go through the, oh my gosh, he's cute, I'm in love, and then it never goes to, hey, you know what? He never wanted to have kids, and he expects me to be at stay-at-home when I was in college and had a career path, and I was working toward being a doctor, and now it's like people are confused, and this is when the arguments ensue. So I totally get it. I totally get it. But you said something in the book about being patient with ourselves, because I know a lot of times we want to point fingers at other people. It's like, it's your fault. It's your fault. You did this and you did that. And we never kind of look at ourselves. So can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest gifts that my marriage has given me is being open. I mean, I think Christina knows everything about my life, my fears, my worries, my doubts. She knows everything. There's nothing that I haven't shared with her, and I think that's the beauty of having a good foundation for your marriage, is really be open. We see so many couples that the other day we were doing a workshop, and we talked to couples that are like, well, I went through my parents got divorced and I went through a lot of pain, and I don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about those things. And it's so important to talk about those things. And that's why the book talks about healing your marriage before it begins. You need to be open. It is going to be painful, but you need to reflect and have that communication open. We see so many couples that get into their marriage with debt, and as soon as they come back from the honeymoon, they're like, hey, guess what, honey, I have $100,000 in debt, so you tell me how we're going to deal with that. And that's when the problems appear. So what if you have that communication, open communication, and be open without really thinking that your spouse is going to judge you? Another exercise that we do that is very powerful is having a dreaming exercise where you dream where you want your marriage to be 4 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and really come together. You can do it separately, and then you come together as one to really unify that dream into one. And when we see couples going through this exercise, there's so many things that come out. They're like, oh, I didn't know you wanted to get your master's degree. I didn't know you wanted to take a trip to Europe. And I think that's so important because those things are going to come out, because some couples get married and they are hoping, or they are depending, or they're waiting for expectations that will never happen. And that's when the problem appears, right?
Yeah. And to speak to your whole inquiry around patience, I think, I am not, and we joke about, I am not the most patient person. Okay. I definitely struggle in that area. I've definitely had to learn to become more patient as a wife and also as a parent, which is a whole nother, right? That's a whole nother bag of tricks. But, but I think that patience is kind of like your secret weapon in the most benevolent sense, right? In your relationship, in your marriage, because for me, it's about boundaries, about healthy boundaries. Like I have had to work a lot. There's a lot of alcoholism in my family. So I've had to really work on having healthy boundaries in all my relationships, including my marriage, and not really just falling for some codependent patterns with Javi. And, I have to check myself, continually. I mean, certain times are better than others. But what I've realized in that self-reflection is that when I am clear on my own boundaries, I'm usually more patient with myself, and I take care of myself, and I understand I'm doing the best I can. I'm learning as fast as I can. I kind of turn down that dial of self-critique or noise. And so that allows me to be more patient with Javi. Right. So it's very much like this direct mirror or like parallel process of like, how can I extend patience to him if I am not giving grace, right, or patience to myself? And so I think it's a tough one because sometimes we get worn down. I mean, it's like the same argument or the same thing. I mean, we have hit those potholes, we have hit those, burdens, and they feel sometimes too much, right? Too much. But I think what the patience piece is, a lot of times you got to back away and you got to nourish and nurture yourself. And a lot of that for us is getting into our own individual relationship with God to then help us sustain us, right, for that long haul. Because you will hit bottom, and so there is a max. I'll just put it that way.
And I think that's what we don't want to admit, is there is a maximum, there is a minimum. You're going to hit a rock bottom, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, I think one of the things is, it's kind of like we'd rather start drilling holes in the floor than to deal with it.
Yes, that's a great one. Yes.
So it's really, really kind of crazy. But there is something that I did want to ask both of you. And it's kind of, I've noticed this over the years where, it's kind of like everyone has this grand idea of what their future holds. And for for women, it's usually the, I'm going to get married and I'm going to have this great ceremony, and we know our whole entire wedding. And the funny thing is, we never get past the altar. We never get past the altar. And I think the difference for me was my mom sat me down at one point and was like, okay, that's wonderful, but you do realize that after the beautiful ceremony and all the money is spent, the work begins next day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, huh? I was like, no, but you've gotta. And she's like, no, sweetie. The work begins because now you're working on your marriage. You're not just working toward getting to the altar and everybody seeing you in a beautiful dress. And so for me, that honestly changed my perspective. And believe it or not, I had this kind of weird, my mom was kind of weird that way, because I had this conversation with her when I was like 12.
Ooh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So it was like, we had this conversation. So I've always kind of had that, well, not always, but from that point, I had that mindset of, okay, you know what? Work begins after you say I do. It's not just about the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
But then I've noticed for guys, it's kind of like, when you're dating them and they're like, so yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grow old and I'm going to travel the country on a motorcycle. And it's like, okay, but we're supposed to be getting into this relationship. Well, you can kind of come if you want. If not, So it's like, how do we get past that? How do we get past the whole, seeing past what you actually want? And someone actually had put it kind of profoundly, which I never thought of, is, in other words, you create your own story and not having your significant other be a supporting character.
Yeah, I hear that.
I will speak from the men's side, and then I let Christina talk about it. And it's interesting that you asked that question, because this morning we had this conversation because I led this morning I led yesterday I led a men's retreat, virtual retreat. And Christina and I were talking about men, and especially Christian men. And one of the things that I'm observing and going through my faith journey and being a husband is, we as men, we tend to be very passive in the way we live our lives. We're not action oriented. We're not taking initiative and taking ownership and being a true disciple and taking our wives or significance other high up there. We just passive. And we don't really pay attention to those things, right? I love how men, they have this men's groups and they, complain about their relationship with their wives and be married and this and that. And it's like they're putting this mask on and not really taking the mask on and say, hey, what is really happening in your marriage? Right. And start behaving like a man, because I think a lot of the teachings that we have been taught is we need to do the opposite as a woman, right? If a woman cries too much, my dad used to say, you don't cry, you don't do this, you don't do that. Right. And always looking into the opposite of a woman. That's not what being a Christian man is all about. Being a Christian man is really following Christ, right? Well, how Christ was, how Christ treated women when he was here on earth, and the way he behaved towards other men. So I always tell men that jump into a marriage, hey, this is a union to be one with the Creator. So you need to really plan and really dream together and building this up, right? And that's going back to the exercise that I mentioned is that dreaming exercise to really come together as one. Christina and I would laugh all the time because we call each other pioneers, because we have done so many things, so much growth since we met, that I tell Christina, I say, hey, what do you think the 50s are going to look like? And what about the 60s? And what we're going to do when we're 70, right? We laugh because we have this vision that we put in together as one.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really important, I think what you're bringing or speaking to is the fantasy, right, of the wedding. It's like that sort of fairy tale, like the whole honeymoon, you know, and I even am like vigilant around how I speak to my daughters. And we just recently had a conversation about this too, around the message they receive around that and how much importance that fantasy, because it is a fantasy. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a beautiful celebration. There's joy and there's a ton of beauty there, but it's one moment, right? And like you said, you're looking at the long haul, or your mom kind of pointed it out to you. And there's a saying in our ministry that, you know, your wedding is a day and your marriage is a lifetime. And I think that's so key, because we do need to dial down our expectations of what marriage is. And it is almost still, believe it or not, you'd think, even with like somewhat rising divorce rates and now with millennials not getting married as much, period, you would think people would be more open about it. Like, hey, what's up? Like, why are people divorcing, or why are they choosing not to get married? And I still think it's taboo. Like, I still think there's a lot of shame for people to just be open about, like, you know, we've crashed and burned, but we've risen and we've figured it out, or as much as we could for now. And we just keep going. You know, we are a hot mess, but we just keep going. So, I mean, so that to me is, I think, such an important part, like what you said earlier about the transparency. Like, I'm a huge fan of that, because I think it just kind of lightens that load or that pressure that people not only feel to get married, right, or have that fantasy, but then that letdown of like, wait, what? This is not my life. Like, that's not what I'm feeling right now. Like, where is it?
Exactly. And there was something else, because I talk with a lot of young people, and one of the biggest things that I notice is the whole miscommunication, even in the starting out of a boyfriend, girlfriend, or a courtship, or whatever you want to call it. Because it seems like the guy has one idea of the way it's supposed to go, and the woman has another idea of the way it's supposed to go. And the crazy thing is, my friends and I have talked about this, where we talk about how it seems like somewhere in the middle of people getting comfortable with each other, the rules change and no one talks about it, because it's kind of like the guy may have initially wanted to date around and not kind of make this his girlfriend, but instead of saying, hey, you know what, I'm dating around, I'm not looking for a relationship, it's kind of like, well, you know, and the woman may say something, and now it's like, I've heard the worst excuse, and one of those is, well, you knew what it was from the beginning. And it's like, she wouldn't be asking if she knew what it was from the beginning. So it's kind of like, okay, because I know you guys deal with marriage, but how do you suggest that people just starting out start these conversations so that things like that don't get unsaid? So in other words, not that feelings won't get hurt, but in other words, you're communicating, hey, you know what, I'm kind of not really looking for a girlfriend. You know, I'm just looking to date and see what's out there.
Yes, one of the exercises we do in our pre-marriage retreats is getting to know myself. And we talk about being honest. And I think I call it just putting the cards on the table, and really teaching couples to do that, to really set up the cards on the tables before you get into any type of relationship or any type of, I think I'm dating her, but I don't think she's think that I'm dating her type of. So we really encourage couples to really say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for just this or that, and really have an open conversation. Because we see so many couples like, oh, it's not time yet. Let's give it more time. Time for what? Time is something that you're not going to gain back. But we see so many couples, or we see couples saying, oh, he will change. She will change. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's what it is we're expecting like, oh my gosh, I'm such an amazing person. And because I'm an amazing person, they're going to change into exactly what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Not a magic.
Nope. No. And I think, I always chuckle because when Javi and I met, we were it was basically an arranged blind date, which feels like really old school now, right? Because it wasn't totally pre-online dating, but it was like that was pretty early on at that point.
Right.
And not the like mega kingdom, virtual kingdom right now it is. But in any case, we each had good friends. I was friends with Sheila for many years through work. And Javi was really good friends with her husband, and his name he's Luis. And Luis and Javi were like best friends in middle school. Javi's originally from Spain, and so Luis was like his first American friend. But in any case, they're really tight. And so they both suggested that we meet each other, and this was going to happen for a couple years, but we were never available or whatever. Javi was traveling, didn't work out. And so finally, when it was a possibility, they both were like, you need to meet. Okay. And I would always share my sob stories, my dating like nightmares or whatever with Sheila. And she's like, no, I think you need to meet Javier. Long story shorter. Basically what happened was we met and we did have chemistry. We did hit it off. We both have a very similar sense of humor, irreverent, borderlining on sarcasm. And so we clicked right away. But Javi, this was in our early 30s. We didn't meet early on, and we both were educated, had our own lives, and traveled, did our own thing. And when we met, Javi basically, in his way, which was very playful and charming, but he interviewed me. It was like straight up, like, so do you have any ex-boyfriend's phone numbers in your phone right now? Like, he just put it out all on the table. And so what I did, and a lot of people were like, well, didn't that turn you off, or weren't you intimidated? And I said, no, I thought it was fabulous because I just turned it around and asked him the same question. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was almost like permission to be so open. So I do think that is key, is trying to recognize it's okay to not play the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay to just be yourself and put yourself, your wants, your needs, your beliefs out there. And it's nothing personal, but that's what's so tough, right, about dating and relationships, is because it gets personal quite quickly, and you want to make sure that you know what you're headed into beforehand.
Right. Wow. You guys are awesome. You guys
are so kind.
Awesome. Like, no, I mean, it's one of those things of, I could picture the whole, like, how they say, the Sears, like, kind of, the picture with the frame, like, that is so you guys. But in other words, to me, I find it so awesome that you're so candid and so real with, hey, what you're seeing now is us working on each other and together and ourselves and our family. It wasn't just, hey, this is for the gram, this is for the book, this is for Snapchat, look at us on Twitter. Aren't we taking an amazing vacation? And guess what? One day you'll get there too. So I love it. You guys are awesome. You guys are so awesome. So do me a favor, tell everyone where they can find you, where they can find one of your amazing retreats, and especially where they can get your awesome book.
So our book, we're really excited to depending on what your preference is, it's on Amazon. So you just go right on there, Boundless Love, Boundless Love, Healing Your Marriage Before It Begins. And you can get paperback, you can get an electronic Kindle version, or you can get an audio version, which is relatively new. And we love our audio version. So we highly recommend if you're like a walker or you have a long commute, super cool. And then we do have a YouTube live. We have a YouTube channel under Boundless Love, as well as a Facebook Live. So it's a combo every Friday evening. If you can't make the time, you can always catch it because it's recorded and up there. But it's called Cafecito for Two. And we interview other couples who are real and transparent and faith-based and talk about how to give each other hope, right? And whatever lessons and challenges we're facing. It's just very, very open and fun. And that's every Friday. And then Javi, do you want to talk about our fabulous website?
Sure. And they can get information about the other services that we provide on www.boundlesslove.us. And we are a nonprofit ministry, so everything that we do is for his name.
Mm-hmm.
We decided to go in that path because we really want to help other couples that either they're struggling or at the same time they want to, what I call, make a high performing marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe that the power of two is essential for a marriage, and you can do so many things when you are on the same page. I think
Oh yeah,
a lot of gifts that God has for you. So balancelab.us, we're there for you.
And we have some free stuff on there too. Well. So please check it out. Help yourself.
See, guys, they're giving away stuff. They're talking one of my favorite languages. Everybody has love
freeness.
And one of my favorite languages is free. Keep telling people I am fluent in free Spanish and sarcasm.
Love it.
But guys, thank you for coming on. And if you guys want to come on again, I mean, I'm sitting here. There were times when I honestly had goosebumps just listening to the two of you. And I honestly have to say thank you both for doing this and doing it together, and one, deciding to heal your marriage, and then two, just bringing it to the rest of us.
Oh, thank you. It's our pleasure. This is the treat. We loved hanging out with you.
Thank you. So guys, all of their information will be in the show notes, so you will not miss anything. Check out their free stuff, check out their YouTube, check out the website, and check out the book, because the book is interactive, guys. You get to write notes and make notes to yourself and for yourself, and it's really, really cool. So yeah. So it has been a joy having both of you. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless you.
Oh my gosh, thank you again to Christina and Javier. This was so amazing. Didn't they give us some great gems, guys? Oh my gosh, you can find all of their information in the show notes, and make sure you check out their book, Boundless Love, and go to their website and check out their YouTube, Cafecito for Two. So, as always, guys, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy shopping.
What's up, everybody? This is Dee Watkins, host of the Unfiltered Views podcast. You are now tuned in to CQP Moments with the Coupon Queen Pen.